What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Not So Stupid podcast. Today we're going to be going through a Q&A asked by you, the listeners, but more specifically my followers on Instagram. So as with most Q&As, I put up a question box on my Instagram story, and you guys were so kind to throw in all the questions that have been on your mind for me to answer on this podcast. If that is something that you want to take advantage of next time, make sure you're following me on Instagram. The handle is @stupid.fit. Stupid is with 2 O's. It's always with 2 O's. And next time I post that question box, you will have the opportunity to ask a question for me to answer on the podcast. Likewise, if you don't have an Instagram or you don't want to follow me, which is cool, I get it, I'm not going to take it personally, you can email me. Juma, Jumha, @stupid.fit. You can email me questions anytime, really. It doesn't have to be questions you want posted on the podcast. If there is something on the podcast you want more clarification on, if there's something in your personal situation that you want more clarification on or you want some direction with, my email inbox is always open for you. I want to be a available resource for you anytime you have that happen. So that is how you can ask questions for the next Q&A podcast, or how to have your question answered at any point, whether it is to be posted on the podcast or not. Now, before we get into the actual questions part of the podcast, I do want to say this podcast is fueled by Strong Coffee Company. Strong Coffee Company is a awesome coffee brand, instant coffee brand that is powdered, quick to make, has protein in it, it has MCT oil, it has nootropics to help get your brain fueled, and I just had a cup of it, so I might be talking fast and moving really quickly. But they are also a sponsor of the show, so if you want to try out your first batch of Strong Coffee, I would definitely recommend getting the sample pack to see what your favorite is. You can do that by following the link in the show notes and using code STUPIDFIT for 15% off your first order or any order afterwards of Strong Coffee. Now that we have our intros done, let's dive right into the questions. I wrote them all down briefly. Usually when I do these Q&As, actually I should say every time I do these Q&As, they are mostly improv. I do like to make it seem, I do like the feel of an organic setting with the Q&A. I like to imagine that you are directly asking me the question and this is how I would answer it if we were in person, straight off the cuff kind of thing. I don't want to have too much prepared, not in a bad way, but I do want to make it seem very organic and authentic. But getting into this now, the first question is, can you explain, and then this is in quotations, can you explain hit your daily protein and hit your daily protein and calories and let other macros fall wherever? And this is a really good question because this is something I'm sure I've said on the podcast a good number of times. It's something I say pretty often, and a majority of my clients will follow this kind of approach when they are on their fat loss journey in particular or in their maintenance phase as well. And what this means, well, let me backtrack and actually kind of break down what calories and macros are in the first place. So all the calories you eat, everything that is food, everything that is drink, everything that you drink that is made up of calories is made up of macros. It's made up of some combination of macros. And the main macros are, and the only macros really, are fats, carbs, and protein. Alcohol can be considered a fourth macro, but for the sake of this argument, let's just consider these 3 macros. So everything you eat is going to be made of these 3 things. Fat is 9 calories per gram. Carbs and protein is 4 calories per gram each. So anytime you see something, if it has 20 calories, there's going to be some combination of protein, fats, and carbs made up of it. You can't have calories without macros. Now, with that being said, your total calorie intake is ultimately what's going to determine whether you gain weight, lose weight, maintain weight. So if you have a calorie goal, you want to make sure that that is prioritized first and foremost to reach the goal that you're looking for, reach the physical goal that you're looking for. The reason we want to prioritize protein is for a few reasons. It's a good number of reasons, actually. For one, it will help us maintain or even build lean muscle tissue if we are in a fat loss phase, which is really important because if you're trying to lose fat, you want to make sure that the weight you lose is fat weight. You don't want to lose muscle weight because then you lose definition, you lose the toneness, you lose health to some capacity. So we want to maintain muscle as much as possible. So we want to make sure that of the 3 macros, protein is our priority to hit on a daily basis. And another reason we want to have and include protein is because for digestive reasons. For one, well, they're both digestive related, but not directly digestive related. And I'll explain why in a second. For one, protein has a high thermic effect of food. So it takes extra calories to digest protein as opposed to the other macronutrients. So by including more protein into your diet and prioritizing it, you're able to burn extra calories through digestion than you would with any of the other macros. And another reason is because protein is a very satiating nutrient. It helps keep you fuller longer. It helps keep you keep your appetite suppressed longer as well. And that just makes it easier to stick to a calorie deficit if you are in a diet or a fat loss phase. Now, when we say hit your protein and hit your calories and then let carbs and fats essentially land wherever, we're saying that you're going to prioritize your protein. So let's say you have a goal of 150 grams of protein a day. That comes out to about 600 calories. That comes out to 600 calories. It's 4 calories per gram, 150 grams. So 150 times 4 is 600 calories. If you have 600 calories and now your total calorie intake is, let's say 2,000, just to make it easy, then you have 1,400 calories left to eat. So if you have your 600 calories of protein, your 150 grams of protein, the other 1,400 calories can come from whatever ratio of carbs and fats you want. And as long as you stay within your calorie threshold, you stay under 2,000 calories total, you'll be fine. You'll still be able to lose weight. You'll still be able to get the results that you want. The idea here is is to prioritize the important nutrient of protein, which is often underconsumed and has a lot of valuable benefits for us during a fat loss phase, and giving you the flexibility to make other food choices that you want to make without it being too restrictive. So let's say, for instance, you have a party coming up and there's going to be a lot of pastries. There's going to be like a lot of pasta, for instance. If you go through the beginning part of the day and you get a majority of your protein in and you want to like have a good amount of pasta in the evening because your friend makes the best pasta in the world, then we let go of the carb goal. You're not going to hit a certain carb goal, but you're going to just aim for a certain calorie goal. So you can have as many carbs as you want as long as you stay within that calorie threshold. And that gives you that extra flexibility. Likewise, if it's on the other end of the spectrum, if you like fattier foods, if there's like this crazy peanut butter guacamole thing that is happening, those are the first two things that came to mind. It's a weird combination, but maybe it actually tastes good. I don't know, but if that's more your style and you want to indulge in that during the weekend, you have some peanut butter of a guacamole taste festival that you're going to, then you can use those extra calories on fat as opposed to carbs. And as long as you stay within your calorie threshold, you'll still be able to lose weight and head in the direction you want in terms of fat loss. So again, the idea is hit your protein and then stay within your calories, and you can kind of mix and match whatever ratios of carbs and fats you want for the entire day. As long as you stay within your calorie threshold, as long as you hit your protein, you will be more than well enough in continuing the pursuit of your goals. So that is a really good question, because I do say that a lot. So for anyone that's ever been consumed, now you kind of get where I'm coming from with that and understand the purpose behind that. Next question is, for individuals that have bad anxiety and need to work out hard daily, any advice? And I asked this person specifically when they asked the question for more clarity on what it meant. And basically what they're asking is, they have really bad anxiety and they feel the need to work out really hard every single day. And if they don't work out really hard, they end up super stressed. And if they don't go through that process, they just create more anxiety and overwhelm for them. So they find it hard to take a rest day. They find it hard to not do too much. And it's well-intentioned to try and do a lot, but it is gonna burn you in the end in a lot of ways, because training is, especially intense training, you're saying you want to train hard. It's not like you're gonna do yoga or some light exercises or anything like that. You're trying to lift heavy, you're trying to keep your heart rate up, you're trying to do interval training, maybe whatever the case may be. You want to work out hard, and you want to do that on a daily basis almost. That is never recommended, because training in itself is a way of breaking your body down. It's any kind of training that you do, any kind of lifting that you do, what really happens when you're doing those things is you're breaking down your muscle tissue. And when you're breaking down your muscle tissue, you need to give your body an opportunity to repair that muscle tissue. If you're not giving it that opportunity to repair the muscle tissue, you will never actually build muscle, and you'll never actually burn fat. You'll just continuously break down muscle over and over and over again, which will lead to excessive inflammation on top of the anxiety that creates other inflammation in your body, and joint injuries at some point, and a stuckness, if that's a word, a stuckness in where you're at with your physique, if you're trying to change your physique. More often than not, with someone that has really bad anxiety, that has high anxiety, if it's not like extreme, I would definitely recommend what is more beneficial to you to slow things down and do slow intentional movement instead, because anxiety in itself is a very high speed state that you are in. It's a very central nervous system activated state. It's a fight or flight response state to something that is happening. And likewise, your training, intense training especially, is that same kind of state. So if you're constantly putting yourself in this position, and a lot of anxiety isn't always in your control, but it's still something that's happening to you, and it's still something you need to take into account. If you're constantly in this high central nervous system state, if you're constantly in this agitated state, you're constantly in this inflamed state, these are all the same things. Your body's constantly being worn out. Your body's constantly being torn apart, basically, on the inside. And even though you might feel fine, even though you might feel relieved, stress relieved, at some point your body's going to give. It's going to give out on you. It's going to tap out. And for an extreme situation, this leads to adrenal insufficiency, which is the worst thing in what I've heard of from people that have had it to ever experience, because you will be in a state of constant fatigue all the time because your body cannot produce adequate cortisol hormones or other kinds of energy production hormones to help you even move properly. Like for months, most people that have adrenal insufficiency, when they get to that point, they'll need to be do light bike work for like 4 months, a couple days a week. Their body won't be able to handle anything else. Otherwise, it's breaking down. They're going to pass out. It's going to lead to other internal issues. Like, it can get really bad. Of course, this is an extreme situation, but doing this for a long enough period of time, your body will get to that point. So I would say, instead of feeding into this need to work out hard daily, find different outlets that release stress that will cause you to calm down more naturally. Whether if you need something to move, a leisurely bike ride, a walk with a friend, rollerblading, what else? Swimming, as opposed to like something super intense that gets your heart rate up really high, would be a much better release for you than lifting really heavy in the gym, doing a HIIT class, going into a cycling class or a circuit class or anything like that. Definitely recommend slowing yourself down and getting into the habit of slowing yourself down, whether that is through journaling, meditation, writing, drawing, some creative outlet, whatever the case may be. You're going to benefit a lot more from mentally slowing yourself down than by beating your body down even more through excessive physical activity, through excessive physical exertion. You always want to manage your stresses. Doing more is never the answer here. So if you're constantly under stress, you're constantly anxious, you're constantly overwhelmed, you need to balance that out with some sort of recovery, some sort of slowing down, calm activity. Ideally, you have a 1-to-1 ratio of stressors to relaxers, but realistically, in the world that we live in, that's not always easy to do or feasible for most people to do. So doing as much as you can to relax yourself and calm yourself down and put your body in that rest and digest state, in that recovery state, is going to be the most ideal thing for you. And finding those outlets that you enjoy to do and can do regularly and are easily accessible to you are what you should try to focus on instead. It might be hard to break out of that habit because you enjoy working out really hard, but if we shift it from working out really hard 7 days a week to working out really hard 3 to 4 days a week, and then finding calm, relaxing exercises the other 3 to 4 days in the week, you'll see a lot more benefit in your mental and physical health than you would with this current method that you're doing. So that would be my recommendation. The advice is find and try other things that put you in a calm headspace, and don't demand so much from your body. Again, easier said than done. If you need more specific advice, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram like you did, and I'm more than happy to help you find those outlets. But that is definitely going to be the priority and what's best for your health in the long term and the short term. This next question is, do you need to test out your max, and how often? And for those that aren't familiar, your max means your max lift. And for most people that ask this question, it's in reference to your 1 rep max. So how much weight you can lift for only 1 rep. You know, this is very popular in the powerlifting community. This is very popular in like any kind of bodybuilding as well. Just being as strong as you can, seeing what you can do as your all-out effort for one rep. Okay. This past week, I've been doing my 1 rep maxes for the 4 main lifts. So I've done squats, bench, and overhead press so far. Tomorrow I'll be doing deadlift. And do you need to test out your max is a good question. You don't need to. Not everyone needs to test out their max. And for most people, I definitely wouldn't recommend it. I would only recommend it for more experienced people in terms of actually testing out their 100% max, 1 rep max. But I do think everyone can benefit from going through some sort of strength test. And every client that I ever have on board, we go through a strength test to start things off, because this is a good reference to seeing what your max capacity is, to seeing what 100% effort is like. Because for a lot of people that are getting into fitness for the first time, that are getting into training for the first time or dieting for the first time, they don't always know what their max limit is. They don't always know what it feels like to really push yourself to the edge. And that's a very valuable feeling, because that'll dictate how much weight you can do. A lot of times you're a lot stronger than you think you are. There was this study done by Brad Schoenfeld. I don't know if I ever say his name right, but that's always how I read it. Where they tested the 10 rep max for, I think, like 20 men age 18 to 24. So they asked them what their 10 rep max was, and every kid told them what their 10 rep max was. And then they forced them to do as many reps as possible at that weight. So if they said their 10 rep max was 150 pounds, they said, okay, we're putting 150 pounds on the bar. You're going to do 1 set as many reps as you can. So in their mind going into this, they think they can only do 10 reps. But for a really high majority, I think it was like 80% of the participants in this study, they did at least 60% more. So they hit 16 reps or more than they thought, 16 reps or more when they were actually tested. So obviously they were 60% stronger than they thought they were. And they wouldn't actually know this unless they pushed themselves to that point, unless they were forced to actually test out their strength. So in a lot of cases, and this is very common for most people, they are limiting themselves, limiting their results, because they think they can't do as much as they actually can. So putting yourself in a position where you are forced to push yourself, or you're forced to test your strength, is a really helpful gauge to improve the rest of your lifting. Because even though you won't be doing your max the entire time, you can be doing more than you thought you were doing. So this person thought this was their 10 rep max, when really this is their 15, 16 rep max, right? And they could have been doing a lot more for 3 sets of 10 than they were otherwise. So having that experience of testing out your strength is valuable in helping you, improve your workouts and do more in your workouts without even demanding so much more. And it also helps you recognize what it actually feels like to push yourself to the limit, to push yourself to 100% effort. Because for a lot of people, once we get to 80% effort, our mind is like, oh, we gotta stop, but your body can still continue going. So until you push yourself to 100% effort, you don't know what it feels like. You'll think your 80% effort is 100%, and you'll stop sooner than you likely should be for most weights/reps. And the second part of this question is, how often should you test your maxes? And I wouldn't test them frequently. I definitely wouldn't test them weekly. I wouldn't even test them monthly. I would say the most frequent you should test your maxes is every 3 months. That is the most frequent, I would say. Usually go through a certain amount of training blocks. You go through one main what's the phrase? You go through one main phase of training. So I just went through a 12-week strength building phase. And after I finished the third block of this one phase, that's when I tested my strength again. Because the point of the strength building phase was to see how much strength I've developed in this time period. So I did the strength test at the beginning of the training block, and now I did it at the end to see how much I've actually improved. It's a good gauge to see how much I've improved. And let me actually add to the first part of this question. Do you need to test out your max? Another benefit of this is I do this with fat loss clients as well, is that we will use this as a gauge to see how much muscle we have on your body, because there's a lot of things, technology, that will tell you how much body fat percentage you have, tell you how much muscle mass you have, but they have such a big gauge of, what's the word? Something of error, error percentage, they have such a big percentage error that they're not reliable. So our most reliable gauge of how much muscle you have on your body is how much weight you can lift, because there's a direct relationship between how much muscle you have and how much weight you can lift. So if we're about to go through a 12, 16, 20 week fat loss phase, we want to try and maintain as much muscle as we can. And the best way for us to gauge that is to do a strength test at the beginning, do a strength test at the end, and if the weights are similar or higher, we were able to maintain or gain muscle during that time period. If the weights are significantly lower, that means a lot of the weight that we lost was actually muscle and not fat, which is the opposite of what we wanted. So this is just a good gauge for us to make sure that we stayed on track the way that we wanted to. And again, testing this out just as through major training phases, at most quarterly, but twice a year is probably like a good aim to look at. And you can test out your max in several different ways. You don't have to test out your max with your 1 rep max. You could test out your 5 rep max, your 10 rep max. You can even test out putting a ratio of your body weight onto the bar and doing as many reps as you can. So what I mean by that is, if I'm 200 pounds, I would do something like my body weight on a bar. So I'd do 200 pounds on the squat bar and see how many reps I can rep out at 200 pounds. And that would be a good gauge of my body weight AMRAP, right? And likewise, you can, if you're 200 pounds, but there's no way you could do 200 pounds, you could do half your body weight. So you could do 100 pounds on the squat bar and do as many reps as you can with half your body weight, some ratio of your body weight for as many reps as you can. That's another way to do a strength test. So there's a lot of ways to go about this, but the main idea is to actually push yourself and test your strength at least to some capacity, right? 1 rep maxes, again, I don't recommend unless you're an experienced lifter. AMRAP tests, like I just mentioned, that is something I would recommend more frequently to new and experienced lifters. And then rep tests that aren't 1 rep maxes, so like I said, 5 rep maxes or 10 rep maxes, whatever weight you could do for those, that is something I would also recommend for the less experienced people. So that was a really good question. Drink some water. All right. The best training split for 3-4 days a week training. So to answer this question really quickly, the best training split for 3 or 4 days a week. For 3 days, I would always recommend full body 3 days a week. That's always going to be the best thing. For 4 days a week, you have more options. You can either do full body 4 days a week, you can do 2 full body days and an upper body day and a lower body day, or you could do upper, lower. So you have more options on that front. Another thing you could do for 3 days a week is full body and then upper, lower. Now, there's 2 main things that you want to consider and you want to try to use. You want to try to understand when you're picking a training split that's best for you. For one, it's going to be in terms of your schedule. So like how many days a week you're going to go. You need to know that first. What's a comfortable amount that you can guarantee to go every single week. Once you decide that, then you want to focus on frequency and volume. Frequency and volume / intensity, I should say. So in most cases, for most people, you're going to want to hit the same muscle group multiple times a week. So if you noticed, I didn't say body parts for any of these splits. The reason being is because when we do upper body twice a week, we're hitting all the upper body muscles twice a week. So that's a frequency of 2 for each muscle group. That is the minimum frequency I would recommend for everybody. Likewise, for full body 3 days a week, you're likely hitting each muscle group at least twice. You're not going to hit every single muscle group every day, but you're going to hit each muscle group at least twice during that 3-day period. The goal here is that, the reason being is that frequency is an often overlooked aspect of training. If you're training your muscles once a week because you're doing a body part split, you're limiting that muscle's ability to develop properly and get to the way you want it to look, or help you, man, I'm stumbling on my words right now, or help you break down, or help you burn the calories that you're trying to burn, or build the strength that you're trying to build. So with, for instance, full body 4 days a week, if you have one lift on the first day that is a bench press lift, a chest focused lift, you can do your max effort and max intensity on that lift for that day and burn more calories overall and get better results in the long run for that. And then the next day where you have another chest-based lift, you can also focus your energy on that completely, because that might be your one of 2 or so lifts on that day that are push related or chest related. Whereas if you have an entire chest focused day, an entire push day, your last exercises, the second half of that workout, you won't be able to do as much weight, you won't be able to do as much reps, the intensity is going to be lower, the total volume is going to be lower, because you already fatigued yourself so much from the first half of the lifts. So there's a little bit of a disadvantage to aiming to do just body part splits, because you can't maximize what you're doing out of it. Whereas if you split up that whole workout, the whole chest workout that you would normally do on one day, into 2 days, upper body days, and you also add 2 back focus days, or pulling 2 halves of a pulling day to each day, now you're doubling down on what you're able to on the weight you're able to lift, total calories you're able to burn, the angles that you hit your muscles at, the total volume that you're able to work, the total intensity that you're able to work, and see results that much faster because you're training it that much more frequently. So you want to hit that frequency as often as possible. I shouldn't say as often as possible, but at least twice a week for most major muscle groups or major movement patterns. So push, pull, knee flexion, and hip extension. You want to hit those movements at least twice a week on 2 different days so that you can get the most out of it. So that was a good question. Generally speaking, first things first, again, recapping, you want to see what fits your schedule best in terms of how many days a week you can lift, and then find a split that you enjoy and it is hitting the muscle groups or movement patterns multiple times a week. So great question there. Constantly bloated and constipated. That was kind of, I didn't know what this question meant. I responded to this person and they never responded back, but they said constantly bloated and constipated, question mark. So I'm assuming they're asking what to do if they're constantly bloating and constantly bloated and constipated. That was a tongue twister right there. But for the most part, I would go through this progression in terms of seeing and checking what could be going wrong in their digestive tract for, not, because if you're bloated and constipated, you're holding out the food, you're holding out the gas in your body, and your body's not willing to release it. So there has to be some reason for that to happen. And the 3 main ones that I would start looking at first that are really easy quick fixes is, 1, are you drinking enough water in the day? If you're not drinking enough water in the day, your body your digestive tract doesn't have enough lubrication. It doesn't have enough substance to kind of break things down and move things along properly. So 1, I would say check and make sure that you're hydrated properly. Once you hydrate properly, you will have much smoother bowel movements if you don't normally have smooth bowel movements. The second one is, are you intaking enough fiber? So the typical recommendation for fiber is around 15 to 20 grams for every 1,000 calories you eat. So if you eat 2,000 calories a day, you want to aim for 30 to 40 grams of fiber every single day. There's a couple types of fiber. There is soluble and insoluble fiber. They each have different roles in the gut in terms of how it causes the the waste to shape. First, I would check on how much general fiber you're intaking and see if you're not intaking enough, try to prioritize having more. And then if you are having enough fiber, seeing what kind of fiber you're having. Maybe you're having enough of or too much of one type of fiber, and not enough of the other one, and trying to balance those in your diet. And then the third thing is stress, managing your stress. A lot of times, and this is super common, if you are overly stressed and overly inflamed, you're overworked, your digestive system won't work properly because it doesn't have the energy to work properly, because your body is trying to use that energy to help manage the stress and inflammation in other parts of your body. So excessive inflammation is actually a very common cause of lots of gut issues and lots of digestion issues as well. So seeing that your stress is managed as well, you're not at a 10 stress every single day, and trying to bring that down and calm yourself will be really helpful. So those are the three main things I would say initially that anyone can do as a general rule of thumb. More specifically, and this will vary from person to person, it would be checking what food sensitivities you might have that you didn't know of. So this could be, just taking a food log to see when you feel bloated, when you feel constipated, and seeing if there's a trend. For a lot of people, it is dairy. When you have dairy, or a certain type of dairy, even not even all dairy, you recognize that you're bloated and constipated for like the next 72 hours. All right, cool. You took a note of that. You recognize that this is what happened after you consumed it. Now you can either minimize or eliminate it from your diet. Maybe you have, I don't know, every time you eat tomatoes, this is also kind of a common one. Every time you eat tomatoes, you get indigestion and you get constipated and you can't go to the bathroom. Okay, cool. Now let's limit your tomato intake and see how you respond. See if your gut responds properly after that. Because if it does, then you know that this is actually an issue, and to limit it from your diet so that you're not experiencing this regularly. And for more extreme situations where it seems like everything is bothering you, going through an elimination diet protocol is probably the best way to go. So this means that you have a serious something going on, a serious something. I don't want to call it an infection. I don't want to call it a disease. I'm not trying to diagnose you, but there is something going on that is giving your gut constant problems, and you need to listen to your gut and give it a break. So going through an elimination diet, usually where you eliminate high FODMAP foods and focus on, just letting your gut recover, letting it rest, and not work so hard from trying to break down these foods that it has so much trouble breaking down. And once you go through that rest period, once you've eliminated those foods for a little while, give it some care, feeding it the proper foods to help it repair, feeding it the proper supplements to help it repair, and then slowly reintroduce those foods once again to help you rebuild your, once you introduce those foods to help it repair, once you introduce those supplements to help it repair, you reintroduce the foods that you've eliminated, and get a definitive list of what's actually going to sit well with you going forward and what isn't going to sit well with you going forward. So that way you know for sure that this is a good food for me, and my body just needed a break from it to recover, and now I can have this going forward. Like using tomato as an example, let's say you eliminate tomato as one of the several foods that you eliminated. When you started including it into your diet again, you had no issues with it, you felt good, you digested it well, you went to the bathroom regularly. Cool, now we can include that going forward. But when you reintroduce dairy into the equation, it's same result. You're still constipated, you're still bloated. All right, now we know dairy is actually something that's not going to sit well with you. And this is a very individual thing, like I said. And again, going through this protocol is for extreme situations. So I wouldn't recommend this from the get-go. Checking your hydration, your fiber, and your stress first and foremost is going to be the best way to go. But if you're going to go through this, this is the general breakdown. It's remove, repair, and then reintroduce, and build off of that. So yeah, that is, I kind of made your question up for you because you said constantly bloated and constipated, but that is the general direction that I would take in assessing this situation with any of my clients. So I hope that was helpful. All right, let me double check. Yeah, this is the last one. So last question here. Can I lose weight without macro tracking? I don't see myself doing it forever. This is a really good question. This is a nice one. I get this one kind of often, so I'm gonna clear this up right after I drink some water. Talking for how long has it been? 35 minutes straight can take a toll on your mouth. Gets you real dry. But can I lose weight without macro tracking, macro counting? I don't see myself doing it forever. So you can lose weight without macro counting. Whether you count your macros or not, whether you count your calories or not, as long as you are eating less than you are burning, you will lose weight. If you count it and see that, or if you eat the same exact thing. Okay, let me. My mind's moving faster than my mouth. If you have a plate of 500 calories, it's a 500 calorie plate of chicken and rice, something really basic. Whether you track that or not, it doesn't change that it's 500 calories. If you eat it and, that's your dinner, and then you have that 3 times a day, you only eat 1,500 calories for the day. Whether you track it or not, it's still 1,500 calories. So you're still going to lose weight. It's just you are more able to predictably lose weight and predictably get the outcome that you want when you track your calories, because you know for sure that you are eating this many calories. You know for sure that you're having this much protein and this much fiber. You know for sure that you are in the deficit that you should be in, and consistently hitting that point so that you can get to the weight goal that you want or get to the physique goal that you want. Macro counting makes it more of a guarantee that you're going to actually get to the goal that you're looking for. You don't need to do it, but it definitely makes it so much easier and definitely creates more peace of mind when you do go through that. But the thing here is that macro counting isn't made for you to do it forever. I go through periods where I am tracking macros and where I'm not. It depends on how specific my goal is for that period of time. Right now, I'm just in a general strength building and maintenance phase. I'm not really so focused too much on my physique. I'm just focused on getting nice and strong, having strong joints, kind of building muscle, but not too specific with that. So I'm just focused more on intuitive eating. But I earned the right to eat intuitively because I tracked for such a long period of time. Because without tracking, I didn't know what a lot of these foods were made up of. I didn't know how much these portions, how many calories these portions gave me, how much protein these portions gave me, how much carbs these portions gave me. Tracking helped educate me on what the different foods I was eating was made up of and what helped me reach my goal properly, what is going to help fuel me for my training for pre-workouts, what's going to help me recover post-workout. It helped educate me on these things so that now when I eat intuitively, I'm able to I'm able to be successful with that because I went and did the work on the front end to understand these things and learn these things. Now, when someone asks me this, I always like to compare it to climbing a mountain. I heard this analogy once from, I think, Jason Phillips, and it resonated really well with me and made a lot of sense. When you climb the mountain, you are doing all this diligent work to get to the top of the mountain, to reach this goal of yours, right? The goal is fat loss. You're going to need to follow a specific procedure, prepare properly, go through all this, again, preparation. I feel like I was redundant with that, but you go through all this preparation, and once you make it to the top, you're doing great. You got where you wanted, but you don't stay at the peak. You don't hang out there forever. You're gonna come back down at some point. And coming back down is learning how to eat intuitively again. Going up is learning how to macro track so that you have that solid knowledge of food and solid understanding of what food looks like, how the portions look like, and how they serve you. That's what getting to the peak looks like. It's getting to that goal of fully understanding your nutrition, fully understanding what you're consuming. And then once you do that, you're able to wean off of tracking and eat intuitively. The goal isn't to track forever. The goal is to use tracking as a tool to help you get to your physical goal easier. And once you get to that point, weaning you off of that and using what you learned from tracking to take you intuitively. So every client that goes the distance with me in terms of how long we we coach, we go through the entire fat loss phase, maybe we go through a muscle building phase, we'll always go through, I'll use just fat loss phase as an example. If we go through a fat loss phase, we'll always go through a reverse diet phase at the end so that we find their new maintenance and understand what that looks like. And then we'll go through an approach where we learn to eat intuitively using what we learned. So what this looks like is maybe they'll go through a day of eating and they'll just see and feel out their different meals and what they're going to have. They won't log it in advance. They won't even log it afterwards. They'll log everything at the end of the day and see how they did, how it compared to their calorie total, and see how it compared to their protein total that they needed to have in the day, because like one of the first questions we had was, as long as you get your calories and your protein, you're going to be fine. So if they log for that period of time, or I'm sorry, if they logged the entire period of time that we were in a fat loss phase and during the reverse diet phase, and now they're trying to wean off and go into intuitive eating for the long run, they should have a good solid understanding of what most of the foods they eat on a day-to-day basis are going to look like, what it's made up of, how many calories they're going to have, and that understanding and second nature of knowing what those foods are, how much of it they're having, makes it easier to eat intuitively going forward. So when they test themselves and they see that they actually hit their calorie mark by the end of the day after after the 5 meals that they had, they're gonna stay and maintain that success in the long run because they put that work in on the front end to track and understand what their food is. And then once they do that consistently, once they hit like a week or two of consistently knowing how much they're eating and feeling good with how intuitive they are with their eating, then they'll be able to eat intuitively for the rest of their life. That's a skill that they earned and they're able to use going forward for the long run. But without the actual act of tracking for a few months prior to that isn't possible. It's a lot harder to get to that point. Of course, you can learn to eat intuitively and still be successful. It's just not as streamlined of a process. So it's an entirely different approach. The thing is, with macro tracking, again, is that it makes it predictable. It makes getting to your results so much faster and so much easier. It is a skill you need to learn and understand how to master at the beginning. But once you do master that, I promise you, your life is better for it in the long run. And that's why that's my main recommendation for anyone that I coach is going through macro tracking. My main recommendation for anyone trying to lose weight is to start macro tracking, because without that awareness and understanding of what you're eating, you will never really have freedom with your food. And, this is just one way of achieving awareness. It's one way of achieving understanding of food. There's a lot of other ways, but I think personally that this is one of the best ways to do it. And I know that because of all the clients I've worked with and how much success they've had. I know that through my personal experience of learning food and tracking it, understanding it, it's something that works, and it's worked time and time again. So yeah, I mean, to make this long answer shorter, you can lose weight without macro tracking. It is a little harder to do so, and this isn't the answer to your second part, but it is what I should say to the second part. I don't see myself doing it forever. The goal isn't to do it forever. The goal is to do it for a period of time, reach a specific goal, and learn how to eat properly for the rest of your life through that. So that is all the questions for this podcast. Thank you everyone for listening and tuning in. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you ever have any questions that you want answered on the podcast, make sure you're following me on Instagram, or you email me your questions if you have a very specific question that you want answered. My emails are always open. My inbox is always open for anyone that wants to ask a question. So don't be shy. Feel free to email me. I'll promise to respond within a business day at the latest. So give it a shot. I'm always there and willing to listen. But otherwise, thank you guys for listening. Hope to see you guys on the next episode, and you guys have a fabulous day ahead of you.